Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today, I got a special guest joining here today. I've got Michael Stephenson, and we're going to talk about FinOps and Azure cost management. So, Mike, for those who may not know you, I can't imagine anyone on the channel not knowing you, but in the event they don't know you, do you want to do just a brief intro, please?
Yeah, cheers, Kent. Thanks for having me on the channel. So, Mike Stephenson, I'm based in the UK in a place called Newcastle, which is the most awesome place to live, apart from the rain. So, I'm a long-term sort of Azure integration specialist, Azure cloud architect. My days go back to BizTalk, which is where I first met Kent. I'm also the product owner for a third-party product called Turbo 360, which provides sort of management and operations features to support people with Azure solutions. I guess just mention I've been a Microsoft MVP for about 15, 16 years now. I've kind of lost count a bit. Specializing in the Azure space. I'm also just recently I've been given the HashiCorp Ambassador award, which is a bit like a sort of MVP, but for Terraform stuff. So I'm quite pleased to get something new there. And one of the sort of areas I've really taken an interest in recently is FinOps, which is why Ken wanted to sort of have a bit of a chat about some stuff.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you're part of the HashiCorp Ambassador program. That's all about being able to provision resources quickly and efficiently. And then on the flip side, on the back side, you're also interested in cost management as well to make
Well,
sure.
so the so the funny thing is, I've done bits of Bicep before, and lots of ARM, and but I've always preferred Terraform just because that's what I've tended to work with. But my favorite command, Terraform destroy, that destroys all the infrastructure you built with Terraform. So it's perfect for those temporary environments. You know, you want to build something, get your solution going, trash it, don't touch it for 6 months, and then rebuild it again. I think that's one of the really good things about Terraform. I know you couldn't really do that with ARM. Maybe you can with Bicep. I'm not 100% sure, but that would be my kind of one of my go-tos about reducing cost on Azure Terraform Destroy.
Yeah, Nuke can pave. Nuke can pave. So yeah, FinOps. So I run into this term a lot on LinkedIn. I think it's become quite a popular term. And I see you've been talking a little bit about it. You also use the term cost management. And so I guess let's start off with like, what is FinOps and why should customers care about it?
Yeah, so FinOps really, it's like a lot of these sort of XOps practices that have popped up over the last few years. So really, it's about the balance between finance for your cloud spend and then the operations of your cloud resources. So it's about trying to make sustainable costs. So, you know, if you think about all the Azure customers that you meet, none of them are ever happy with the amount of money they spend. They feel like it's, you know, the bill just keeps getting bigger. So the idea of FinOps is to put practices in place that help a company make sure they're being efficient when they spend money on cloud. So as many things, FinOps is not just about tooling. You know, as a kind of for a job, I work for a company who build tools which help you with FinOps practices. But actually, in addition to tooling, there's a people and a process aspect to it. So, you know, do your people know how to build solutions efficiently on Azure? Do you have processes in place that make sure the money you're spending is being managed well? You're not wasting money left, right, and centre, and you're kind of getting rid of stuff when you don't use it anymore, so you're not spending money that's no longer needed. So can I just do a quick shout out, Ken? Actually, on something, I'll just share the screen here. So I think
Yeah, sure.
so the I guess last year I started. I've done cost management for quite a long time in various companies, just because I think from a mindset as I grew up as a kid, I didn't like wasting money. I felt when you go into a job, you're spending other people's money, so you want to make sure you spend it in a wise manner. You don't want to just treat a company's cloud spend like spinning stuff up all over the place. That was just a mindset I've always had. But when I started taking more of an interest in this, I was checking out the FinOps Foundations. This is their website here, and they've got loads of stuff over here about things like the principles of FinOps, practices, personas of different, like a lot of projects. There's different personas. People who are like product managers, sustainability engineers, um, operations people. Then this kind of, I guess, in this diagram here, the FinOps practitioner is really the kind of linchpin that helps pull everybody together to make sure that all the different stakeholders are getting the data that they need and that they're implementing things in a way that would make you get good value for money. So I would say, for me, when I started taking a bit more of an interest in this, I went and they've got some certifications on here, so I went and tried one of them. It took quite a long time since I've done a certification, actually, because you just kind of get busy doing your day job. But I found it was a really good way to like learn the language, because I come from the technical and the architecture background, but actually in FinOps, some of the stakeholders are people like the CFO and the finance operators who speak money language, and then you've got people who speak the technical language. And I think you'll remember this back from being a cloud architect. If you're the person who can translate between these different stakeholders, then it becomes quite an important role. And I found that really interesting to get into. Very like integration, which is why when I was mentioning to you when we were chatting privately about, I think there's a lot of synergies between what integration people do and what that FinOps practitioner does about translating between not just between different systems and application stakeholders, but in this case between finance people and admins and developers and stuff.
Gotcha. And yeah, I know this is a concept that sort of resonates quite well with me as well. So I would agree. In my current day job, cost comes up regularly. I think customers are always looking for opportunities to reduce costs, which is completely fair. Even though like Logic Apps stands up quite well to our competitors in terms of cost, people are always looking for that angle, and I think and that's fair. People should be looking that way. And then even certainly prior to my Microsoft journey, I did work for leaders that were very interested in taking advantage of the cloud and the opportunities of the cloud. And the biggest thing from their perspective was always about ensuring we're getting value and ensuring we're not wasting. And I think that's probably a common theme that we'll run into here today is avoiding the waste, because that's the low-hanging fruit that can provide some quite immediate impact. So,
well, I think if you think about it, one of the things, if you look in any other area business, everybody's obsessed with being lean because you're trying to balance the revenue you bring in with the costs you let out. But in cloud, for a number of years, the idea of being lean in terms of your operating costs has always been a bit of an afterthought. And I had a really good conversation with somebody a while ago where we talked about the balance between user enablement and sustainable costs. And I think cloud's really very focused on delivering value really quickly. Make sure users have a good experience and all the things in that space. But actually, once your system goes live, you've then got to make sure it's sustainable, because if the costs aren't sustainable, then can the business actually fund whatever the system is that you build, or the integration, if it costs more than the value you get back? And there's quite an interesting concept actually in FinOps Foundation. I think it'll be under the principles probably somewhere. Well, it'll be in here anyway. They call it cloud unit economics, which is really the balance between the kind of value of your system versus the cost of it. And the strange thing is, in terms of if you think about the cost of an application you build, the cloud costs the easy bit, because you can really quite easily work out how much it's going to cost, because the cloud vendor tells you. But then you've got some of the costs that are a bit more difficult, like the people costs and the support costs and stuff. But the problem is that companies find it really difficult to manage the cloud cost and sort of really understand what it means. And then when I think as sort of FinOps practices evolve, I think one of the ones I'm finding quite interesting at the minute is, how do I measure the value of what my application produces? So sometimes you might have an app that has a really direct revenue stream because you have customers sign up and make orders.
Yeah.
You might be able to work out how many, what's the total value of orders this application produced this month. But then if you think about a bigger, wider distributed architecture, other things have to happen. So you might have an integration over in the corner that processes the orders, and you kind of forget that that's part of the overall big picture of the cost of producing an order. And I think so that to me is the kind of interesting sort of meta concept in FinOps. So I think understanding them is quite important.
Yeah, and I would say like another sort of area or reason why this is quite interesting for me as well is before Logic Apps, I did spend a couple years focused on RPA, robotic process automation, and that was another activity where there was a very strong linkage to value. I'd love to see some of the mindsets that exist on RPA make their way into integration, because integration at the end of the day is automation at the, after all. So, I think that this is, something that whether you're dealing with costs or on the flip side, more even you're tracking opportunities, like what's the opportunity for the business. I think this mindset's quite important for developers.
So when you think about RPA, then so an interesting question would be: Do you think the value that RPA projects perceive is really based around how many FTEs do you save by creating an RPA process, or do you think they go beyond that and think about what the actual business revenue generated from it is?
It can be both, but I would say it's probably more around the labor displacement. And I know that's something that, people may not like to hear, but I think that is one of, because you always talk about like tangible versus intangible costs, right? And, I've been through these projects before where it's around cost optimization, and there's like, okay, they would always talk about hard costs. And we had this leader, exactly probably what I'm talking about. And she would always talk about like, show me the hard costs. So if we do this, whose budget am I reducing because we've now done this? And I always like to use that as a test when someone goes, oh, like we're driving value, we're doing all of this great work. It's like, okay, great. So whose budget can I pull this value from that you're promising me as a result? And I think with RPA, I think that's generally how it works. You typically have a user. They've got hands on the keyboard. They've got hands on a mouse. Then you build an automated process. And because it is typically more UI integration or UI automation, you are replicating what that user might do. Now, and this is why I kind of say integration comes from that same family. Like, it's just like there's just no mouse clicks and keyboard strokes involved. It's more of this system to system. But that's typically the easiest way to measure it. It's like, okay, and this is why you see those process mining tools, process insight tools. It's exactly what these things do. They go ahead and record what you do manually and who you do a handoff to. And they track that whole lineage. And then they're able to say, okay, like that took 2 hours. That took a week, whatever. And then you can start to say is, okay, what is your internal labor rate? And you kind of just do the math. And then you also account for errors. RPA is not 100% foolproof. There will be some remediation. You need to factor that in as well. But I think at the end of the day, and I've seen some companies do this amazingly well, where they basically can post the results. This is what we're actually driving. And it's one of those things where it's not the IT team that is stating the business benefit. It's more of the business is stating the opportunity and agreeing to the business benefits and giving them the green light to proceed with building it out. So I know we're kind of getting off a little bit of a tangent, but I think there's a kind of important outcome here is that it's truly what are you doing for your company that is measurable. And when I think about cost management or FinOps, I think that's the opportunity to be able to go like, here's the baseline. This is our current spend. Here's the opportunity. And this is the delta. And let's go after the delta.
So I think if we loop that idea right back to integration, let's get right into the heart of Azure integration use cases. So we've got BizTalk customers migrating to Azure. They're coming from this kind of fixed sort of big cost per month for cost per year on a, let's assume they've got software assurance for the licensing. They never really had to think about too much about how do I break down that cost per integration. If maybe I've got, say, 10 BizTalk nodes, my clustered SQL, I'm paying all that infrastructure cost and big licensing, but it was just a big fat cost for IT. As you move into Azure integration, the first things that you can start doing is breaking that cost down. It's not that easy to do, but it is doable if you put the right processes in place and you get your people building stuff in the right way. Then you can make it easy for tools to be able to kind of help you with that. So you should be aiming to be able to work out, let's go from that one big IT cost. Can we work out our cost per interface? And then that can come on to your RPA sort of ideas about, well, can we get the value per interface as well? And suddenly, you've got that cloud unit economics where you can work out what integrations are the highest return on investment, for example. So if you have, say, a backlog of changes requested from the business or bugs, that is it worth spending 500,000 on this integration here when we know we're not going to get that investment back from it? And I think it really changes the mindset of integration. You would know what you get value for money from. You might make decisions, maybe you say something like, these interfaces over here, it's just worth outsourcing them instead of building them internally because, it's just not worth it doing it ourselves. And then you might have other integrations that are your real differentiators. And you might say, let's spend our team's time focusing on making these as good as we can because that's where we get the best return on investment.
Yeah, and this is something I've shared with other people too. Whenever there's these perceptions about integration platforms being expensive, and sometimes they can be. So I'm not discounting that, but I would say, the question I ask back is, have you been able to attribute the value that these integration platforms are providing? And I think that's where it's also moving from the back office. The integration people are in the back room. They're just doing a bunch of coding and stuff like that versus like being more upfront and closer to the actual business and the business outcome and being able to represent that. And I think that's one thing I was sort of fascinated about RPA, where those conversations were always up leveled and were usually with the business as opposed to like a back office IT function. And so that's what I found really interesting spending some time over there.
So I think that's where you get, if you think about like chargeback ideas for your integration platform, if you can start charging back the platform, again, you reduce that overall IT cost, and the business know how much each integration costs. So again, they'll know if it's a good return on investment because that integration might cost them 10,000 a month, but they only process 10 orders. How much are those orders worth, kind of thing?
Yeah, and
so I think that
And I have, so it's interesting because I've been involved in those organizations too, like prior to joining Microsoft. I didn't work with you at this company, so it was a different one, but we did chargeback models, and we did it for integration for BizTalk at the time. That was the platform we used. And so, yeah, like we would take those costs, the infrastructure costs, the patching costs, the licensing costs, the hardware costs, and basically some sort of like operational support, IT support costs, and then you have this big number, and then you're kind of like, okay, but I have like 10 different business units that exist. How am I going to spread these costs and make it fair? Because otherwise, you're right. You start to get into like, well, that's too expensive. I can't just divide by 10. So then you have to start going. We ended up doing more like messages or transactions in BizTalk, and at least that way it was a little bit more representative because you might have workflows that are taking more resources, and as a result, they should pay more than something that runs once a day. But I would agree, it becomes a little bit difficult, and we spent a lot of time doing it. And I would agree, like if there's a way to be able to manage things more based on a consumption-based resource model, and you've got the right tagging and the right resource groups, or however you organize it, then it probably makes it a little bit easier to go, oh, these are your costs. And then it's like you can give people options on how to influence those costs. And I think that's always a challenge before. In that BizTalk world, kind of the only option was like, well, I could turn it off.
Yeah,
and if
get
it's
rid of
providing
a
the,
server, but
yeah,
yeah,
but all that's
get rid of
doing
a
is
server, you play
probably
the license stuff.
all you're gonna do is make everyone else cost higher. So it was always a tricky game, and I think that's another reason why I'm so interested in this topic is because with cloud and consumption-based billing, I would imagine that this is creates opportunities. It's probably part of the problem, but I would say it's also part of the solution because now you have more dials or levers that you can pull if you know what you're looking for.
So I think, so I think for me, the biggest thing that you need to do with, regardless of what tool you use, if you do it yourself with Azure Cost Management or Power BI or a third party tool, the biggest, most important thing to me is the democratization of cost data. So you have transparency, so everybody can see what their spend is. I think that one of the biggest problems we have right now, if you think about this, is who's really responsible for your Azure spend. Is the first question I tend to ask any company I'm speaking to. And what tends to happen is everybody goes, well, it's not really my problem, or yes, there's this big cost here, but that's not my application. And you have let's say you start with the person who's the CIO, CTO, or whoever's in charge of IT. They see this big Azure bill, right? It keeps getting bigger. They have no real idea about what's that bill made up of. Yeah, you might get a really granular line item on Azure that you can then go and break down, but you have no real context around what you're looking at and know where that money's going. So the big problem is everyone just goes, this is too complicated to do anything with. They might spend a little bit of time looking at it, and then you know part of the follow on from that is, right, well, our Azure bill's big, so we need this money, and it's all IT cost, because if you can't break it down, you can't cross charge it. So ITs just seem to be expensive, and the problem is that then the question becomes, well, does having that big bill mean you get a big budget in IT? That means IT is important because they've got this huge spend they've got to manage, but you've got no idea really what it is. You would never stand for that in any other department in a business. Can you imagine if the manufacturing department said, we've got this factory, but it costs you, $10 million a year, but that we don't have any breakdown on that. We've got no idea where everybody goes. It just wouldn't be stood for in a business. But in IT, cloud's perceived to be really complicated, which I think is how it's not really looked at in the same way. And I think for me, that if you come to democratization, so if I'm in charge of the cloud spend, then this is the first tip for any company. Number one, you need director level buy-in to say we care about the costs in IT for cloud, and then somebody needs to be responsible. And this comes back to that FinOps practitioner about making people start looking at cost data. So if you think about that cost, let's say you spend $1 million, say you spend $5 million a year on Azure, right? So if you're the IT director and you're spending that's seen as you've got to get that budget every year. But the problem is, it's like if people challenge you and say, well, we need to reduce the cost, you don't really know where to start. But actually, if you knew that, take the ballpark figures the industry puts out there of 25 to 40% waste. If you talk about waste instead of cost, it becomes a completely different conversation really quickly. So if you said to the CFO, we're spending $5 million on Azure, by the way, we've got 30% waste in that $5 million, people are going to start taking notice and start challenging people to do something about that. And I think that's where I get really interested, is, right, okay, so we've got all this waste. How do we identify where it is? And what do we do about it to get that down? So you want to, which comes back to, how do I get my team to be as lean as possible? I guess just for the conversation here, Ken, I guess we'll try and stick a bit more to what the integration team can do about it for the audience that I think we're talking to. But if you follow some of our blogging around cost management, you'll see a whole bunch of other topics that we talk about at that Uber level. But I think for me, democratization means in the integration team, I want that engineering team to be able to see how much they're spending on a pretty much a daily basis. They should be able to break it down, look at how much each integration costs. When you start putting new interfaces into the dev and test environment, you get a feel for how much they cost really early. think about the cost of change after it's gone live. So many customers come along 6 months after go live and go, we don't like how much this costs. It's like you can't really do much about it now because the cost of change sometimes could be as big as the cost you would save by doing the change. So if you can, the same as fixing the bug, if I can find that bug early in dev, in this case, just treat it like a cost bug. It's an inefficiency. We can make a change and fix it. It costs very little early in the life cycle. So that's really where we want the devs to be able to see the cost data. But really, in the real world, it just tends to not happen. And sometimes the devs, if you speak to a company, ask the devs, have they ever seen their Azure bill? The answer almost all the time is going to be no. And that's really where, the people aspect of changing the culture through democratization of the costs, how you build a better integration team that'll build sustainable integrations.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense because I think if you democratize it and you actually, assign ownership at a lower level, and you treat company money like it's your own, which is a fairly common saying, but I think it makes sense. Then I think you'll have some better outcomes. Like I'm sure you've seen this before. I've seen it a bunch of times where it's like, oh, our costs are too much. Let's stand up a big project to go figure it out. And then like you hire a project manager and you basically erode all of the savings because you've got a big bang effort as opposed to like building it into your culture, build it into your standard operating, procedures, if you will, where you actually can manage these things more incrementally and develop some good hygiene, and then it becomes part of doing business. Much like change management. Cost management should be no different. And I think if people did appreciate kind of where money's going, then I think they would spend it wisely. Because at the end of the day, these are organizations typically have a fixed budget. So it's one of those things where like, what's good for the company should ultimately be good for you. Like if you are saving money that creates openings to spend that money somewhere else on, say, another project or another interesting initiative, that also benefits you from an opportunity to get involved in that. But how many times it's been like, oh, we're in the last quarter, it's keep the lights on because all of our capital budget's gone because we wasted a bunch of money. So
I think one of the things I think we're starting to see companies trying to tackle this problem is to try and gamify to make teams compete against each other.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Doing it, yeah. So shall I? I'll show you a little bit about what we do then. So we aren't gamifying, but we are treating the teams as individual things. So I wanted to show you a bit about how we manage our costs at Covi. So I'm going to show you the Document 360 project. So what we're doing here on the screen is, if you imagine, this is me using the cost analyzer module in Turbo 360 to eat our own dog food. So I have the cost data being imported on a daily basis. And then what I'm doing is I'm creating like nodes for each of the different products that we have. So I've got a separate product team, which they have an engineering team, test team, etc. for each product. So the first thing I want to do is work out what's my cost per product and what other costs do I have that aren't specifically for delivering a product for maybe background costs and stuff. So here on the Document 360 team, in Turbo 360, the first thing I can do is let that team see their cost in that node on the tree, and they can start self-managing some of it. And then we have the overview, which is aimed at people like myself coming in doing governance. I can go in and I can kind of get a bit of a feel about what the spend is with some dashboard widgets down here. And then what we can do with these tree nodes. So this is what I usually call cost in context. So I'm trying to create a tree that models the data in a way that I want to see it. So here, for us at Covi, it's really easy because we've structured stuff in the first instance to fit a nice, easy model for cost management. So I can just say, these subscriptions belong to each product, and they would just map in here. And then what I can do for the Doc 360 team, so we've got a white paper. I'll just show you actually up here. We've got this white paper. So we get on the right page, this one here. It's all about the difference between Turbo 360 and Azure Cost Management. What I'm trying to do here is in Azure Cost Management, it's hard to get those holistic views where I want to look at my team has 4 or 5 subscriptions with many resource groups. How do I get that view across all of their stuff in one place? So you end up with Azure Cost Management, it gets really awkward, or you have to take the data outside in Power BI or Excel and build your own stuff. So here, I can look at it from a team concept, and I can break it down further if I want to. So we have things like this auto create groups here. I can get it to create my own nodes on the tree. So if I wanted to look at things like, generate one node for each resource group, one node for each subscription in like a parent-child, or I could do things like a quite cool one is I can go generate me based on tags. So let's say I've got like a cost center tag in here, probably somewhere. Let's just pick that one for now. But I could say use the cost center tag and generate me one node for each cost center, so I can go and drill into that, and you can kind of create parent-child relationships there. But what I can do is with a Doc 360 team. So a couple of the graphs that I use would be, here's our accumulated costs for this year. So that's the first thing I want to know since the start of the year. How much have we spent and how is it trending up? So I'm looking for a fairly flat trend, showing I've got fairly stable costs. Each month we're having about the same to the product's overall Azure bill. If I start seeing it spike up steeply, I know I've got some things I need to sort of investigate, and possibly ideally it should be trending down a little bit if we're optimizing and tuning stuff. So that's the first thing I'm looking at. Then we might go in and see, right, let's compare this month against last month. Now this here, what I'm doing is I'm comparing this month versus last month to date, but obviously it's only the second, so the date range is going to be really narrow. But what I would do maybe for just this demo is I'll go month before last versus last month. So this gives me a side-by-side comparison showing how much I'm spending on each of the common services here. So I can go, I can see here we've got this spike. Now, when I'm looking at this, these are what questions I'll ask the engineering team. So I'll go, right, that there's a spike. What's that all about? And we do so like once a month we just get together for 20 minutes with each team and just have a look at a couple of views of the data and then chat about what's been going on. So what happens is we get these really interesting things quite often happen where you might have a new customer came on board, which means you get like a lot of extra activity. Or sometimes you'll have like operations things. This one here in particular, the app service spike was because there was a certificate renewal on a given day, which is why there was quite a bit of extra cost for that one service. But we do also get things where sometimes we've had things where Microsoft have made a change that impacts our cost. We had a quite interesting blog post coming out where we made a change to the routing properties on storage accounts because we had Cloudflare in front of the storage account, and we had a big cost spike, and it was because Cloudflare had been purged, so it kind of refreshed the whole CDN from storage. And it identified, by investigating that, we identified a couple of tunes we could make that would lower our ongoing costs, which was quite interesting. And then with these graphs, if we want to investigate, we can do like click through from them here. So I can go, show me that by resource, and it'll open up a new graph and show me what's going on. And you can just sort of start digging into stuff, and you might change. In this case, probably want to change it to a table or something. And then I would also do. I use this one here quite a lot, which is just a side-by-side table. So I'm just going to change the dates again. So month before last and last month. So here it's going to give me a table where it shows me some of the cost changes by, in this case, by service. I might do it by individual resources. For example, if I want to compare, which resource went up by the most. The idea here is I've got loads of data. How do I focus in on the things that I need to look at as quickly as possible without having to be an Azure expert? So here you hopefully get the feel that with these graphs, you can just do really basic Excel skills are enough to go and look at the graphs and then as a manager, you'll be to figure out questions that you would ask of the development team, even if you're not a technical expert. You might say, why did this cost go up by that amount? Here I'm looking at things like that log analytics. Why did that go up by that amount? It's probably either a tuning or a new customer had extra traffic and that kind of thing. So we're really trying to make it the time that you spend doing a cost review. Do you want to do it once every 6 months where it becomes a totally unachievable task? Or do you want to get all your teams to spend 20 minutes a month doing a really quick review, focusing in on the key areas, and it just becomes part of your daily, you could even make it part of a sprint or something like that if you wanted to, it just becomes part of your business as usual. So that's really the analysis piece. And then monitoring, again, it's all about making it easy, so you can set up budgets on Azure. They take time to set up, they're complicated. Here we can do some really easy stuff. So again, this would be a team budget, so it's not as low level as individual resource groups. For Doc 360, we'd have to set up as a minimum at least 5 alerts for all the different subscriptions. And if you wanted to do resource groups, it gets even more complex. Here we just do a budget for the entire team. We can do this widget up here lets us do more granular budgets if I want to do ones for different environments, or I can even generate subnodes for the different environments if I want to have like a full set of all these features for each environment. Works quite well. So I've done that with integration customers before. But here I just go, right, what's your budget? So I'll say, right, I'm spending about 500 a day. Let's have a budget of 550, and then it'll just tell me if I ever hit that red line. And then we've got the anomaly detection, which looks at my entire team and says, have I had a sort of variance in my cost enough to say this might be something you want to check out, and then we'll trigger an alert for it. And so monitoring should be just easy to set up. 5 minutes you're up and running. You might make it more complex later, having more granular budgets, but that whole idea of getting from zero to hero really quickly is what we want. And then so for my Doc 360 team, we then look at optimizations, and so here we've got like a schedule, for example. So I could create so here I'm going to create like a schedule that would reconfigure resources based on like time windows. So for example, 9 to 6, I might say, let's pretend it's a non-prod environment. So I'll create one for UAT. And I'll say, right, everybody's out of the office at 6 p.m. Let's shut stuff down and turn stuff off. So I think, actually, Ken, bear with me a second. I'm just going to flip to our demo environment because I think I won't have permission to show you those resources there.
Yep, it works.
So I'll just show you. I've got an integration team demo that we usually talk to integration customers about. So over here, if I do a schedule, so same idea, but here I can pick resources. So if we come right back to Logic App customers now, so there's a couple of really cool things we've got here. So if you've got Logic App Standard, you're going to have an app service plan. So you can set on that schedule, let's say you want a WS1 in the evenings and morning, you want a WS3 when everybody's in the office for testing. So this workflow would basically just reconfigure your plan to suit the time. And obviously you're going to save quite a bit of money by reconfiguring. What we would find is that if you've got, say, a WS3, if you do a reservation, you might save sort of in the region of 30-40%. If you've reserved your WS3. But the problem with that is actually if you're not using it for 60% of the time, if you can scale it down or turn it off, you'd actually save more money by staying on pay as you go. And this is the kind of decision point customers have to make about do I optimize the workload's usage, or do I reserve it, or do I right size it, which we'll come on to in a second. But this is a really good one for Logic App Standard. We also have consumption logic apps where we can disable and enable them. So I had a customer who got like 80 logic apps pulling service bus constantly on consumption, processing messages. If you turn them off, so it was 80 logic apps for 5 test environments. If you turn them off out of hours, you can actually save about $1,000 a month just by turning them off, so they're not sitting calling for messages that aren't there. And then you can see we've got a bunch of other stuff here that you can schedule as well. Then the second one's the right size, and so the idea here is that all of the resources I've got deployed, are they actually set at the right appropriate size for the workload that they're running? So a really good example would be if I've got a SQL Azure database with 100 DTUs, if it's barely being used, kind of scale it down to 20 DTUs and save some money. Same with a VM and other stuff. So what we're trying to do here is that we talked a little bit earlier about actionable FinOps. So really, for my integration team, what I want to get to is the point where instead of FinOps just being a pretty report that you put in front of your manager, can we actually do something to reduce your costs? So if I've got an integration platform and I can start showing you here the resources that are in your platform. So here you can see most of these are pretty well configured already. I've got a couple of VMs here. So this is one of our BizTalk demos where they're sat doing nothing. So they're shown as idle at the minute, which means I might want to decommission them because it looks like they're not doing anything. And I can click on them and we'll see the metrics as shown that they're pretty much turned off. In fact, I think that VM's turned off at the minute. And then you might even have some resources like here, an app service plan's kind of showing that it's doing quite a bit of work. We might want to think about upgrading it. So what we tend to find is that on the Azure Advisor, so for anyone who's not familiar, Azure has a feature called Azure Advisor, which gives you some cost recommendations. What we tend to find is that a lot of those recommendations tend to be, can you reserve the compute? Because that's really good for Microsoft to get predictable demand. You get a cost saving, and you do get a few others. But we've had customers that go in and the advisor recommendations are telling you nothing to really change, but actually we're still finding loads of VM resizes that you can do, and they're just not flagging up. You're potentially getting thousands worth of cost savings that an advisor isn't really looking for. And then the other good one for Logic App customers would be reservations. So let's pretend we've optimized our ESE plan or our WS123 plan, so we right-sized them to be appropriate. We know that any scheduling we might have done has been done. Then you come to reservations. So if I know I'm going to need 10 nodes of a WS3, I can commit to that for a year or 3 years and reduce the costs. So here, I think if I remember right, so Canadian, you were talking about something like $400 down to about $450 down to about 250, something like that. We were seeing on a 3-year commitment. So if you're going to be doing an integration platform for a long time, at least doing some commitment on Logic App plans will be a good thing to do. And I think that the good thing as well is this would be a really interesting cloud versus on-prem thing is, if you think about how our scaled BizTalk had to buy a full machine and then add another full machine, then another full machine, but on the cloud, if I've got a WS3 that can, you've got the burst scale feature where it'll say run 2 nodes most of the time, and it'll scale out to 100 between 6 and 7 when I get all my data. It'll scale back down. So I might reserve 2 nodes, and then I might let it kind of just burst out on pay as you go, and then burst back in. But you can just configure that by your reservations for your app service based on what commitments you're doing. So I think it's quite a cool feature, but a lot of customers just don't really realize it's there. Particularly the thing we find is cost in context here is the reservations are often only seen by the most senior Azure admins, so the integration team don't even know that any are available to them. But as a minimum, you're probably finding your app services. You've got a data gateway, your VM for your data gateway. You're probably going to have SQL Azure databases. They're probably the most common ones that you can utilize in an integration team.
Yeah, and it's what's pretty cool about this is it looks very easy to use, and it's very prescriptive, and then it's also very actionable. And I think back to like that comment I mentioned before about like, ooh, we need to have this big project and we need to have lots of meetings to like figure this stuff out. It's all like right in front of you. And yeah, like they're, I guess one thing is like spikes sometimes are good if that's
Yeah,
receiving
yeah,
orders because it's the holiday season. Hey, that's good. And maybe you need to like be more responsive and be more aggressive in your scaling. But I think the
so,
big thing here is just addressing sort of the anomalies or understanding
yeah,
where there's waste and then being able to clean
yeah,
that
yeah.
up.
So that's really what we always try to come back to is, cloud's great because it'll scale based on usage, but if it's scale and lean, then it's good. But if there's loads of waste, then as you scale, you're just paying more for all that wastage, aren't you? And I think that's where
Yeah.
the kind of being efficient about building your solutions and configuring it. And but even with that, though, Kent, the biggest, most common things are customers just over provisioning resources because we set up a SQL database. We think the VM needs to be so big because that's what we stuck our finger in the air and guessed that it was. It goes live. The users never complain, so we assume it must be a really good system. The users never complain about this, and nobody realizes that the users are so happy because the VM never gets beyond 2% CPU because it's so over provisioned,
Yeah.
and nobody really knows that that's an issue, and
Yeah. People have
so
moved on to the next problem, right? The next project, and things get lost. But one thing I would suggest for the audience is like if you want to get more face time with your leadership, provide them insights into cost management. I think every
yeah.
single CIO, director of applications, director of infrastructure, they're all interested in this. And if you can save the company money, and really it comes down to eliminating waste, like focus on the
Yeah.
value and eliminate waste. Uh, this is a tool that allows you to identify those opportunities.
So I think that one of the really good things to do, regardless of what tool or how you do it, I think doing like a PR exercise when you've made a change. So we um, we made a point of when we were doing a change, we said, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what we think the impact of it will be. This is the projected cost savings. We then did it in like a month and 2 months later. We reviewed, did we actually realise the savings we were going to get? And then we'd share that with the other teams and with the management. And the idea is that people can see, oh, that's a good thing to do. Look at the success they've had. And then when other people in other teams get challenged around their costs, they'll go, oh, yeah, the integration team, they're really on the ball running their stuff efficiently. Straight away, you start getting um, knowledge sharing between your teams to show how to do good practices. And I think that's a culture thing. It's a great place to be. And it's kind of, you build that bottom up by just sharing good things teams are doing.
Yeah. So no, we're almost at time here, but one thing I did want to ask you before we go is I believe recently you had like a hackathon in Sweden, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. Like just like maybe tell a little bit about like that hackathon and like what were some of the findings that participants found during that event.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is the idea is we're working with partners who want to create sort of FinOps advisory offerings for their customers. So the idea is that we can get together, we'll share some of our experiences from a product perspective about some of the stories we've seen on Azure and about some of the things we think customers should do if they want to be successful. The partner will share some of their experiences as well, and just have a bit of a kind of like a round table kind of idea with customers at this workshop. And then the second part of the workshop's intended to be a hackathon where we'll let the customer get set up with Turbo 360. They can start looking at their cost data, and they can start, getting some help by people in the room. We can share some of the things that we think that customer might want to do to sort of get more value from their cost data, and break it down by team and that kind of thing. And then the idea is the customer can take back to their organisation afterwards, a demo that they can show their teams, and they can say, look, here's all the cost savings we found. And then even if you don't continue to use the tool, at least you've got some ideas of where you could save money, and you've got a connection to a partner who might be able to help you if you need help doing FinOps. I think I find it quite interesting, that idea of partners who offer these FinOps services. I think for me, when I go to the gym, I do training with a personal trainer. I think the thing that works for me is the accountability that a personal trainer gives you. So I'm not the best at going to the gym. I don't always try as hard as I should try, but that personal trainer sort of stands there, tells you what to do, makes sure you do it, and gives you a kick halfway through the week to make sure you're coming later in the week. And I think the partner can offer that. So a customer's team, so you've got 10 teams, cost's not the top thing in their mind. They're wanting to deliver value for the business, but if they've got that once a month get together with a partner who gives them the accountability to say, let's do our cost review, and they do the thing that I'm doing with the teams in Corvi, asking them questions about the data that I'm seeing, asking them to explain what does this mean. Then I might give them an idea like, have you thought about doing this over here? Because it might help you out. Or the other team, say the Churn 360 team did this, you might be able to do that here. And I think that's the kind of thing like an advisor can do that makes the workshop, gives the attendee a bunch of things to go away with that could really help them. I think what we're doing at the minute, so the one in Sweden was really good. We met some really good companies over there, and that was with Contiga in Gothenburg. So we had Ahmed, who's been on our FinOps podcast, joined us. We're doing one in Germany, in Hamburg in May. We've got one in April in Bradford with Black Marble. In Germany, it's Data Passion we're going to be with. The idea is just to kind of give people places to go to come to our workshop. On the site here, you can see we've got this register your interest button. So what we're looking for is people to say, look, I'm in New York, I'm in Texas, I'm in London. Can you do a workshop somewhere near me? Then we'll kind of connect with a local partner and try and bring the workshop where people are. They can either be bigger workshops where we might have people from different companies, or we might have very personalised workshops where we'll go and just do one just for 5 teams in that company or something is the idea. I can also do a quick shout out, Ken, just if anyone finds this topic really interesting. We've also started this FinOps on Azure podcast. So we've got 3 episodes out. The first one's with Saravana, so not wanting to take up too much time on the video, but Saravana talks about the reason he built a cost management tool because he's running 4 products on Azure and he couldn't manage his own costs the way he needed to. Looked at the market, didn't find the answer he wanted, built his own, put it in Turbo 360, and now we offer that out to customers as part of our product suite. We've got Rick Hepworth, who's an Azure MVP, who just shares loads of really good insights from years of consultancy on Azure of the different things that he finds challenging and interesting around cost management. We've got Ahmed, where we're talking about some of the ideas around cost management within a sprint. We're going to have my aim with this. So there's some good podcasts out there about FinOps, particularly the FinOps Foundation do a couple of ones where they talk about some of the FinOps concepts, and we'll touch on some of that as well. But what we're trying to do in Turbo 360 is a deeper dive on Azure and get into the weeds and talk about the things that customers struggle with. So like a really good example is I'm going to be chatting to Nino this week about it. So that'll be one of our upcoming episodes. And your first thought's probably, well, Nino's an integration and security guy. Why would he want to chat to you about cost? But think about all those different stakeholders. And my blog article here that I was telling you about, this circuit breaker for budget protection. So I think there's this really fascinating idea of what's the relationship between security and cost management, because actually, you were saying before about consumption-based cost, but actually if you built you had a bug in your system, you had a misconfiguration, or somebody attacked your integration or your application, consumption cost means you could actually have an attack that costs you a lot of money accidentally, and
Yeah.
that's really what this article's about. And I think some businesses, especially when we talk about how logic apps makes integration accessible for SME companies, but actually, if you've had an accidental massive bill because some developer had accidentally built an integration that was hacked and it was on consumption, it would just scale and it would process all of the load it got because that's what it can do because it's on the cloud. But actually, when you get that massive bill, that could put you out of business because you haven't got the funds to pay for it if you're a small company. And I think those are the kind of things that I think a chat with Nino would be really interesting to talk about. And things like we've talked before about things like I'm an integration customer. My security team says I need the maximum VNet integration. My cost management team says I need this to be cheap as possible.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find the balance between those things? And I think, to me, the thing I hope I'm bringing to the sort of FinOps areas from this cloud architecture and integration bit, who can I speak to who has a kind of a dotted line to what we're trying to do here, and what perspective can they bring that we haven't thought about? And I think that should be really interesting for people at all.
Yeah. No, for sure. So thanks, Mike, for joining. Really interesting concept and demo that you showed us here. I guess if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best place to find you?
Our LinkedIn. I'll share my LinkedIn with you. So
I'll put that in
anybody can always.
the chat as well, or in the video
So
description.
this is me. If you're looking for me, I'll pop it on the thing. But yeah, I mean, I get quite a lot of I'm still doing integration stuff as well. So I get quite a lot of people who ask me integration and cost management questions. I love it because it gives me loads of great ideas for YouTube videos. So if you saw my YouTube video that I put out yesterday about long running functions called from logic apps, that was a chat I had with a guy just a few weeks ago. And people ask you these questions, and you just get good ideas about how to solve problems. So I love chatting with people about stuff.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks again, Mike, for joining me on this session, and I learned a lot, and hopefully others did as well.
Thanks, Ken.